So welcome. I can see lots of people are still connecting to audio, so let's give each other a few minutes. So even as we're just gathering, it's a really lovely moment actually to kind of gather inwardly. However we do that. So for me, it's really helpful to feel the contact of the earth. And just the sense of all the bits of one's being arriving here. Just as we might like naturally arrive if we we're somewhere that helps us to relax, maybe outside or with a nice view or with a cup of tea. And there's that very natural sense of, I can arrive here. We settle. There can be something of that as we invite ourselves also to settle into listening, into coming home to our being in a certain way. And feeling the sense of other beings gathering here too as we come together in small community, in Sangha, to explore some Dharma teachings together, give time to meditation, chanting, these things that can nourish our heart and our being. Welcome, everybody. Lovely to see you. For any of you who I don't know, I'm Sumedha, and I'm one of the core teachers with Sacred Mountain Sangha. And also, if you haven't been here before, then just to say that the main part of this session is like an hour long. And within that, we'll do some chanting and there'll be a short guided meditation, and I'll give some Dharma reflections. And then after that hour, there's another 15 minutes where you're welcome to stay on if you wish to, for questions or sharing. So that's how the session unfolds. And today, I'm going to give today and next week, actually, I'm going to give some reflections around contemplation of the body and practicing with our body and a kind of sense of embodied practice. So that's going to be the theme this week and next week. So let's start with some chanting, and then I'll give a little guided meditation. So thank you. Michael has put in the chat the chanting booklet, and I'll also share screen. Okay, so that should be coming up soon. Okay, can you see that? Thank you, Melinda. Thank you. That's great. And chanting is a really beautiful way of, even as like as I was saying, even as we arrive and we can feel maybe a settling into our body somewhat, or the way our body stills, as we come to sitting, and helps us to pause. So our body comes with us when we're chanting. It's like, and it's a really beautiful thing that we're bringing together our kind of body, heart, voice, mind, to contemplate and to share these chants actually with our own being and in the space around us. So we'll start with the Namo Tassa, so the page that I'm on, and do the refuges also, and then we'll go down to the qualities of the Buddha Dharma Sangha for recollection, and then we'll do some of the teaching chants. So Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ saranang gacchāmi. Dhammang saranang gacchāmi. Sanghang saranang gacchāmi. Dutiyampi Buddhaṃ saranang gacchāmi. Dutiyampi Dhammang saranang gacchāmi. Dutiyampi Sanghang saranang gacchāmi. Tatiyampi Buddhaṃ saranang gacchāmi. Tatiyampi Dhammang saranang gacchāmi. Tatiyampi Sanghang saranang gacchāmi. And then the recollection of the triple jewel. And this is one of the chants that when in the monastery, Amaravati, that I was part of, we used to chant this pretty much daily, if not twice a day. And there's something about recollecting over and over. So this word sati for mindfulness, which can also mean remembering, and there's repeated remembering anusati. So some of this way we repeatedly chant and listen inwardly to what the meaning of these things may be for us, and it helps to deepen in its kind of own particular kind of a way. So as it's coming into us in a way that is it's kind of non-linear. So Iti piso bhagava arahang samma sambuddho vijacharana sampano sugato lokavidu anutaro purisa dhammasa ratisata deva manusanam buddho bhagavati sawa kato bhagavata dhammo sanditiko akariko ehipasiko opanaiko pachatang veditabo vinyuhiti supatipano bhagavato sawakasango Ujupachipano bhagavato sawakasango nyayapachipano bhagavato sawakasango samichipachipano bhagavato sawakasango Sango Yadidam Chatari Purisa Yugania Tapurisa Pugala Esa Bhagavato Sawaka Sango Ahuneo Pahuneyo Dakineyo Anjali Karaniyo Anutarang Punya Ketam Lokasati. Then we can go down to the 5 subjects for frequent recollection, which is on page 7. And this is one of the teaching chants, and one of the quite austere sounding teaching chants, as a lot of you know. And it's also one of the ways of starting to contemplate our body and our mortality, which is a very important part of the teaching for me. So, and I'll say a little bit more when I talk about the way I find it helpful to hold this kind of reflection. So just being sensitive to your being and taking it in as feels appropriate to you, or if it feels better to just listen, you're also welcome to just listen. So I am of the nature to age. I have not gone beyond aging. I am of the nature to sicken. I have not gone beyond sickness. I am of the nature to die. I have not gone beyond dying. All that is mine, beloved and pleasing, will become otherwise, will become separated from me. I am the owner of my karma, heir to my karma, born of my karma, related to my karma, abide supported by my karma. Whatever karma I shall do, for good or for ill, of that I will be the heir. Thus we should frequently recollect. And then we can contemplate the qualities of heart which help us to meet this human condition in a way that helps to release suffering. So the 4 boundless qualities on page 8, which are also said to be very natural qualities, very innate within our being. And notice we're sharing them to our own being and suffusing them into the universe. So I will abide, pervading 1/4, with a heart imbued with loving kindness. Likewise the 2nd, likewise the 3rd, likewise the 4th, so above and below, around and everywhere, and to all as to myself. I will abide, pervading the all-encompassing world, with a heart imbued with loving kindness, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. I will abide, pervading 1/4, with a heart imbued with compassion. Likewise the 2nd, likewise the 3rd, likewise the 4th, so above and below, around and everywhere, and to all as to myself. I will abide, pervading the all-encompassing world, with a heart imbued with compassion, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. I will abide, pervading 1/4, with a heart imbued with gladness, likewise the 2nd, likewise the 3rd, likewise the 4th, so above and below, around and everywhere, and to all as to myself. I will abide, pervading the all-encompassing world, with a heart imbued with gladness, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. I will abide, pervading 1/4, with a heart imbued with equanimity, likewise the 2nd, likewise the 3rd, likewise the 4th, so above and below, around and everywhere, and to all as to myself. I will abide, pervading the all-encompassing world, with a heart imbued with equanimity, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. And we can end with the great compassion mantras, so invoking the energies of Kuan Yin, she who hears the sounds of the world and has the capacity for response, compassionate response that helps to relieve suffering. And as we're chanting, we can also have the sense of radiating these energies out, sharing the blessings of these energies in our heart and out into the world, for the release of suffering. Namo Tabi Quan Shu Yin Hu Sa Namo Tabi Quan Shu Yin Hu Sa Namo Tabi Quan Shu Yin Hu Sa Namo Hala Danno Dolaye, Namo Hariye Polu Jadi Shaubolaye, Uti Sato Paye, Moha Sato Paye, Moha Jailuni Jaye, Nan Sapala Faye, Sodano Dashi Namo Shijini Toi Mangariye, Polu Jidi Sharpola Namo no la jinsha shini moha pando samye sapato dashapa nashayan sapasado pasado namo pache mo fata do dajato nanapalushi lujai di jaila di ishini moha putti sato sapa sapa mola mola moshi moshi nito yun juru juru jaimang juru juru Fashayedi moha, fashayedi tola tola dini shrafola jala jala momo famola mudiri ishi ishi shurno shurno ala shenfola shani fasha fashion fola shaye huru mola huru shini sola sola shini shini suru suru Putiye, putiye, putoye, putoye, midiriye, no la jincha diri, shiny no paye, mono sopa, sopa moha shitoye, sopa shitoyu, sharpan laye, sopa no la jincha, sopa mola no la sopa, shinu sangha machaye, sopa sopa moha shitoye sopa jajila shitoye sopa Utomo je shitoye sopa nola jinja panchelaye sopa mopani shangelaye sopa namo la danno dolaye Aliye polu jadi shambolaye sopa nanshi jandu mandola batoye sopa. Noticing how our breath has been carrying those vibrations through, into, through, out from our body and our heart. Some meaning, some sense, some feeling into these chants, depths of meaning. Seeing if we can settle in somewhat with those vibrations as they're maybe helping to enliven and settle our body. Connect us to a larger sphere of being. And noticing that even as our voice has been carrying these sounds through and sending them out into the spaciousness around us, helping to connect our body, our experience. It's also what it's like to sense into your body as it's settling here. What helps to invite you into your body in a way that feels somewhat easeful. Maybe we can notice the delicateness of the space as it's touching our skin, our whole body, gently, very gently touched by the air, by the space. Noticing there's a gentleness in the space around us that is just receiving. Our body as we settle here. And we allow our attention to be invited into the sense of our body by the breath. How do you feel your breath? Without a sense of having to pin it down. Almost as if we were just gazing at a sunset, allowing ourselves to be touched by it. We allow ourselves to be touched by the breath as it arises and falls. Noticing the rhythm or the aliveness. How often do we come just to touch into our own embodied aliveness here? Sometimes the rhythm of the breath can give maybe our thinking mind just a place to rest into. Be softened by. And noticing that we don't have to do anything in particular to find this. We're just like allowing our attention to settle towards the breath. And rest with it a bit. Tasting what it's like. Noticing that our attention can soften and open to receive the breath as it's moving. You can notice if it's long, if it's short. Don't have to control or grasp. We can be open enough to just notice the movement. And in that movement, also the aliveness of our being here. Connectedness of our being here. Giving ourselves some way of resting and noticing our embodied aliveness. It's always here for us. Very shortly we'll end the meditation, but just tasting into anything that is supportive to help you to help your attention to stay with your body and any grounding that brings. Noticing that comes with us. We can end the meditation there. So I noticed on the Sunday Sangha send out this week, the quote is from Deepen, and it says, "Bless those around you. If you bless those around you, this will inspire you to be attentive in every moment." And it makes me smile. That it's very beautiful, and it connects, of course, to the beautiful Kuan Yin ceremony that Kittisaro shared on his birthday last week. Great thing to do with your birthday. And also I know Juna taught the week before about Kuan Yin practice in like every day, in the everyday, which I still want to listen to. I haven't listened to that yet, but I definitely want to. And there's something, when I was thinking of the theme for this week, contemplating the body is anyway a very important theme for me in practice, but I thought it actually connects up with this sense of somewhat of reverence and of coming to a different attitude in our life. So it can connect up quite nicely and in some quite unexpected ways. So hopefully that'll come through. And this week I'm going to talk mainly about like some of the more classical ways of contemplating the body and some of the fruits for me that can bring. And then next week we can explore that a little bit more deeply, what that might mean in terms of actual practices and the embodied ways of practicing that can come through. So, so I first got very interested in body practice mainly because I wasn't taught about it at the beginning. And I was like, oh, I seem to be missing some large part of my experience here, you know. And not that it wasn't there, but I wasn't tuning into it actually in the way that I could have been. So it was there in the teachings, obviously. But sometimes in some ways of it, as in some parts of the teaching, the body seems to get a bit of a bad rap. So, there's a very famous sermon called the Fire Sermon, which says, the senses are burning, or the senses of our body are burning with the fires of greed, hatred, and delusion. And it's like, okay. But actually, first of all, if we look at the world we live in today, there does seem to be quite a lot of that happening, probably in our own minds and in what we're seeing. And also for me, there's a very profound invitation in the Buddhist teachings not to reject the body, not to reject the senses, but to come to a different relationship with them, a more grounded, saner way of relating to them that doesn't lead to suffering in the way that does happen when we just get caught in this is what I'm in wanting to get or wanting to get away from. So and there is a danger in spiritual practice sometimes because our body is a vulnerable place. It's a sensitive place. There's a danger sometimes for me in spiritual practice of wanting to leave that, of wanting to come away from it. Whereas what I think can be really, really fruitful is this adjustment of our relationship with our experience. And so contemplation of the body can be really powerful. And so the first, so when we were chanting, I invited us to chant the 5 subjects for frequent recollection, which is the chant on I am of the nature to age, I am of the nature to sicken, I am of the nature to die. And the reflections that basically we will, all that is mine, beloved and pleasing will become otherwise, there will be change. And then that we're the owners of our karma. And so this recollection is not necessarily an easy one because it's inviting us into our vulnerability. But this is the very core turnaround that I see in the Buddhist teaching, is that essentially when we're not truthful about the reality that we're living in, which is that we are in a vulnerable, sensitive, mortal body, we try and distract ourselves in all these ways that are like so destructive. It's like the consumerism, like the ways in which not that we shouldn't try and maintain our health, but the ways in which we try and extend artificially over and over and over, and we push and we push and we push, and we deny the reality of our aging or our vulnerability, or that we will die. It's like, for me, the harmful results of that are, and this is what I think some of the Buddhist teaching is pointing to, are way more than if we come to accept our condition, then and to understand it and to meet it, it can actually be a real doorway of wisdom and compassion, like really. And so the Buddha actually presented these things also in another teaching, under the teaching of the 4 heavenly messengers. So I'm sure you all know the story of him leaving the palace, being very protected, when he was a young prince, and going out and seeing people sick, seeing people aging, seeing people dying, and being horrified. And then seeing this 4th heavenly messenger, so like a wandering spiritual person, who reminded him that there may be another way of engaging with this. But it's another way of engaging. It's not escape in the sense of denial, which is what he'd been living in his palace when he was kind of very protected. And so what is being invited for me here is a coming into our experience that is asking for us to do something more than conceptually know that we're vulnerable to aging. It's asking us to taste into it, or sickness or death. It's asking us to taste into these realities and to have some felt understanding of them, which is very different from just, oh yeah, of course I age, it's very different to taste into it. So it's a bit like Ajahn Chah gave this simile in terms of practice. It's like you can describe to somebody the taste of honey, but if you taste honey, you know what honey tastes like. That's the difference between conceptual understanding and like, oh yeah, it's like I can see some of your faces. It's like, oh yeah, honey, so we know something, we know when we know something. And there's a whole sense in practice of this evolution from study, where we start to hear the teachings, and we're like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, where does that fit in? And then we practice with them, and we start to get a little bit of like, oh yeah, where does that fit in here, in my heart, in my being? And then it's like, okay, it finds its place, and it transforms our perception, it transforms our way of being in the world. And this is understanding, and this is what the invitation around the teachings on the body are inviting us into. And it's really beautiful that I found this lovely article where it was saying that one of the things that the great teacher Thich Nhat Hanh said, that is understanding it is love in another name. So when we come into this place, we come into a whole sense of different capacity, actually. It's like, okay. How do I want to live in this vulnerable life, How do I want to live in this shared experience? So, so we can contemplate these, some of the, like, say, the teachings on aging, sickness, and death, within that sense of I'm coming to an understanding that is helping to open and deepen and transform my perspective. And that's very much relates to the framework of the Four Noble Truths. We're coming to ways of understanding our life that are maybe cause less suffering for ourselves and for other beings. And one of the reasons I think this is really, really important is that often in meditation teachings, we think that we are going to meet our suffering, and we often relate to the kind of mental side of our being, or our mind. We want to engage with our mind. But it's almost like, for me, there's one of the things that have been essential for me, I can only talk for myself, but it's been really essential to deepen a sense of the ground of practice, that then I can start to engage with my habitual mind from a very, very different place. And the teachings on body really, really, really help to do this, really. And the Buddha really clearly pointed to the importance of it. So, for instance, there's a teaching called the 33 Synonyms for Nibbana, and it's all these different very highfalutin words for Nibbana, And then it says, and which is the path leading to the ultimate? Mindfulness immersed in the body. It's like, we're not getting out, we're getting in and deeper. We're getting deeper and transforming through our experience. So, and then, as I'm sure all of you know, the body is the first foundation of mindfulness. So I wanted to go through a little bit some of these contemplations and some of why I think they're useful. So there's several methods of contemplating the body mentioned in the first foundation of mindfulness. And the first is, so the phrase is, how does a monk, so monk, nun, practitioner, live contemplating the body in the body? So we come to a reasonably secluded place, a quiet place, where we're in a place of listening. And then we can contemplate mindfulness of breathing. That's one of the body contemplations, which that we just started to touch on in the meditation. So mindfulness of breathing. And there's a lovely phrase in that it says, just as a skillful turner, so like a wood turner or turner's apprentice, making a long turn, just knows I'm making a long turn or I'm making a short turn. So we come to know the breath in that very embodied way of a craftsperson, like where you're not thinking with your brain, I'll do this and this and this. Your body's knowing something, and so like immersing ourselves in that way of knowing. So mindfulness of breathing. And then we know the postures of the body. That's another body contemplation. So when we're going, we know we're going. And when we're coming back, we know we're coming back. So simple, clear. I'm aware of what's happening here. I'm aware of what's happening with my body. Whereas, which sounds easy, actually, how many of us, I'm always like, what did I do in my cup? Put my cup down somewhere. I've got like cups all over the shop because I put my cup down and I haven't been in my body while I've been doing it, or I haven't noticed. And, so sounds simple, but, there's a real practice in there. And then the third body contemplation is mindfulness with clear comprehension. So again, it's like this sense of a clear sense of what's happening. So mindfulness can be very precise, very close, fine mindfulness, and we can have this larger, broader awareness, which the word is sampajanya, where we have this clear sense of what's happening. And that goes into some very deep pockets because we can start to reflect on, is this useful? Is it helpful? How am I doing this? That's another way. And then the fourth reflection is on the repulsiveness of the body. So this comes back to maybe that tone of, oh no, I've got to leave it. And I think it can be a really useful contemplation. So it's saying, to contemplate hair of the head, hair of the body, nails, teeth, skin, blood, bile, phlegm, excrement. We contemplate our bodily components. And for me, this can be a really useful contemplation, and it can also be turned in different ways. So as far as I understand, it was actually given as an antidote for when we're really full of lust. So it's like if we're really like just always like lustful or something, then it's like can be helpful to contemplate, oh, that, it's made of phlegm and blood and, all the rest of it, So it's a teaching to be used in that way. And it can also just be, for me, I find it without adding the word loathsomeness, I find it very grounding to contemplate the component parts of my body. That I'm a compounded entity. So when my habitual thinking mind comes in and is like, oh, I like this bit or I don't like that bit, or there's a measuring or a comparing or a judgment or something, we can just contemplate the component parts. It's like there's nothing to measure or judge in there. It's actually very equalizing. And then my personal favorite reflection on the body is on the material elements. So I will say more about this next week. But we can reflect on how we are literally made of water, of what the earth provides, of air, of warmth. So this for me is a really powerful contemplation, and we can't, in the teachings it said we contemplate, say, the water element inside, the water element outside, which can sound theoretical, but it's like if I don't drink water several times, many times a day, I'm not going to last very long. This is not a theoretical teaching, and this is where the invitation is to come to a deep understanding of our interdependence, our interconnectedness, which very much transforms our perspective on who and what we are and how we relate in the world, and how we might even relate to the different mind states that come up in our being. Because when we sense this very deep interconnectedness, there is a groundedness and a reverence for life that, for me, I find naturally doesn't want to foster harm, inwardly or outwardly. So the perspective on our life becomes radically changed if we allow these contemplations to work on us. And then the last of the classical contemplations in that section on body in the Satipatthana Sutta is to contemplate, it's cemetery contemplation, so to contemplate our body in decomposition. Which again doesn't sound very edifying, but there's something about when we become viscerally aware of our impermanence. Again, that radically changes our perspective. And so this for me it's an invitation not to fantasize about that which might feel painful, but to come to a grounded understanding of our transiency. So body as a doorway to really understanding in a very visceral way our impermanence. So this is a gateway to wisdom. And it's also a very deep gateway to compassion, because as we start to understand our own condition of sickness, our own condition of vulnerability, our own vulnerability to dying, and we do that in an embodied way, there's something about, for me, the felt resonance with other beings, the felt resonance also with the elements that we're made of, that there's a natural sense of not wishing to foster harm in one's own being or for another. And so it's a very visceral, profound invitation towards compassion. Also, as the wisdom doorway, it's bringing us into compassion. So not a wisdom that just goes, well, I'm impermanent, in a conceptual way, which can lead to a kind of indifference or something, a kind of not quite clicking. But when we take it in an embodied way, it does something very different for me, where we deeply know it and we deeply sense our shared condition with other beings. And so one of the words that I really love that is used for compassion is anukampa, which is to vibrate with. And a bit like a drum vibrates, it's like we need a body to vibrate with. You know, we vibrate with our hearts, we vibrate with our bodies, we vibrate with our minds. And there's something about, in an embodied sense, being able to sense each other's vulnerability from knowing our own, which can open this pathway of care and of wishing to bring non-harming into the world. So I've only got a few minutes left, but those are some of the very classic contemplations, and they can be just so profound in bringing us back to a very deep ground, to say, using the breath, we come to a certain rhythm in our being, which is very different from the way our mind runs around. So we can slow down, we can ground, we can be like that craftsperson who is learning in a very different way. And there's an authenticness in this, because this is like each one of our body, though it's very interconnected, it's also one's own experience. So this is a very important sounding board, our authenticity also. And it's also this doorway to like our larger sense of being. So it's both very intimate, very particular, and really important to be authentic. And it's also this doorway into the larger body of life, from which we learn our impermanence and we learn to relate with compassion. And we also recognize very profoundly at the center of this that there is a listening that can deepen and journey through these realms in a very steady way. So it also points us back to that listening heart of Kuan Yin, or the awakeness of the Buddha that is here to meet our vulnerability, to meet our transiency, to meet the changingness of things. And there's a steadiness here that is both able to receive and also nourished by this grounding experience. So when the Buddha awakened, he didn't, he touched the earth as his witness. So there was this very deep sense of connected awakening. But really a blessing to be with you all. And as I say, we'll continue next week for those of you who wish to. So, thank you so much.